Thanks, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Diverse Podcast. I'm here this time with Sandip Thakrar, who is the CFO of Enterprise BT. So hugely excited about this one. Sandip, welcome. How are you getting on today? How are you getting on?
Yeah, no, very good. And thank you very much for having me today.
No worries, no worries. It's going to be a really good one for anyone who is, really interested in progressing their careers and figuring out, how do you get to that top level? It's rare we get to sit down with someone who's, climbed to CFO at one of the biggest companies in the UK. So I'm really excited about this one. And I actually used to work at BT, spoiler. So especially interesting for me. So Sandy, why don't you start by giving us just a bit of a background as to, who you are?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of reside out of Northwest London. I'm married with two young boys, aged 7 and 5, who keep me very busy outside of work. And going back even beyond that, so my parents, they came from East Africa. My mum from Tanzania and my dad from Uganda in the kind of 60s and 70s, for a better life, really, and for more kind of for education and for prosperity in the UK. And they landed in the 60s and 70s, and what they kind of worked their way up in in various roles, worked very hard at single companies actually. And yeah, so that's kind of really me. And actually outside of work, I'm a massive cricket fan, and general sports enthusiast, and maybe we'll come on to a little bit of that a little bit later. But kind of work wise, kind of took a traditional route really. Went to school, university, college, university. Went to City University in London, studied economics, and then found myself climbing up the ladder at the Carphone Warehouse, within the finance team there. Did a host of different roles, and then found myself joining BT in 2013. Didn't really know what I was getting myself into, and I've enjoyed a number of years here at BT so far, where I've done a number of different roles in the sector I work in. And yeah, last year had the opportunity to take hold of the CFO role in the enterprise business in BT. Here I am today.
Incredible, yeah, incredible journey. And just want to sort of take it back to, what you were saying about your background and your parents there. And by the sounds of it, you're the first in your family to go to university in the UK. And, I guess you didn't have necessarily an extensive network around you who's sort of worked in retail already, who can kind of show you the ropes. So was that a challenge in any way? And how did you think about that in terms of your career sort of being the first one, I guess,
Yeah.
in this
Yeah,
space?
my mum actually, she started her career out at 16, joined HSBC, and then retired. It was Midland Bank at the time, then retired as HSBC 40 plus years later. And then similar to my dad, he kind of went straight into work. And it's funny, they came here for education, but actually didn't further their education. They kind of um, my dad actually didn't go to school, and then when he was here, he kind of just fell into employment. And then same with my mum. And yeah, I was the first one to go to university in my family, in the UK. I had an uncle that went to university here, but but that was it really. And it was quite a big deal actually, that, oh, my son's going to university. And they were really, really proud, I'd say. And equally though, it was interesting where I didn't really have that advice at home in terms of I should do X, Y, and Z. But actually, I guess it's quite stereotypical, I guess, within the Asian community, of going down a certain type of careers, be it a medical career or a science career or a business career. And that was kind of the kind of the initial push. I was very kind of business literate, was very good at maths, and I guess the journey I took felt quite obvious. But actually, my grandparents, who live out in North London, their next door neighbour, he was a CEO of a PR company, and actually he was someone that I spoke to from quite a young age, actually, just around career and his business. And actually, he gave me an opportunity to go and work for him on work experience, which was my first ever job. And actually that kind of really set me up and set me out, just in terms of understanding the working world, and where I go from there. But that accompanied with the advice from my parents of, I don't just working hard and making sure I try and pick a career that's got longevity and it can be successful in, with the kind of the two kind of defining factors of where I am here today, really.
Interesting. And that first bit of work experience there, in the media space, obviously very, very different to what you're doing now. Well, that's interesting as well. But in terms of actually getting that, was that a very simple, you don't ask, you don't get sort of thing, or how did that come about?
Yeah, basically, I remember my parents, they were kind of encouraging me to ask, his name is John, to ask John, would there be any opportunity to come and work for him in the summer? And I asked him, and he was like, "Oh yes, Sandip, of course, no problem." And I was expecting just to go and work for free, and he was like, "Oh, how much do you want to get paid, Sandip? What's your going rate?" And I was kind of stumbled straight away, and then the kind of first hurdle of kind of negotiation, I was like, and then I said, "Look," I said, "John, whatever you want to pay me, I'm coming in for the experience and to learn about your business and the working world." And I ended up collecting £100 a week.
There you go, shrewd negotiator.
Yeah,
Never say the first number. Let them go first and set the bar. If you would have
yeah,
said eighty
yeah,
pounds, you lost
yeah,
yourself £20 a
yeah.
week.
I would say £100 a week and free lunch. He treated me to lunch
There
every
you go.
day, so he paid for my lunch every day, so I'll take that.
There we go. Love it, love it. And so let's talk about, I guess, the transition from there into the sort of corporate world. And
Yeah,
I'm curious about any, yeah, that what that transition was like, because again, there must not have been a huge amount of people you knew in that space already. And I think, of course, I'm thinking about our listeners, many of whom who are maybe trying to break into the corporate world, would be desperate to work at BT, and do listen on to the end, and we'll hopefully help you with that to some extent. That may be a little bit daunted by that. So what could you share with us about that sort of transition, any imposter syndrome, how you got over it, and that kind of thing?
yeah. So if I think about my kind of first real job after university at a car phone warehouse, it was very much around. I was quite daunted by the working environment and the size and the scale of what I was kind of walking into, the number of people, the way they spoke, the way they, I don't know, just they kind of all knew what they were doing, and you were kind of, I was kind of going in, going, well, kind of winging it a little bit, I would say, just in terms of what I'm going to land, I'm going to, you know, I'm often go, right, who's doing things well, what do I like the look of, and then how do you replicate that? So very much of that kind of day one, that person's doing that really well, that person says that this time, let's do that. But it was very much around picking up and observing and picking up the right skills. And actually, I think the biggest lesson for me actually is one of the biggest lessons at that time, or kind of reflecting and looking back, was the best thing I could have done at the time is just kind of be myself, really. And I think you kind of go in. And if I think about people landing in my organization today, I'm like, be yourself and tell me what you don't know, and how do we help you, and how do we help you kind of progress. So I think that kind of plays a big part. And but the imposter syndrome was there then. I would say it's there today as well, in different guises as well. You go into new environments and you're going, should I be here? How should I act in this environment? What should I say? So it's always kind of pops up here and there.
Yeah, I remember my first day on my placement, and I joined with a lot of people who kind of like privately school educated, from kind of very different backgrounds, it seems, and yeah, and spoke loads of different languages, and
Yeah,
knew all the corporate
yeah,
jargon, and
yeah,
I definitely felt I stuck out quite a bit. And
yeah,
I guess you try and just sort of adapt and
yeah,
and settle in. But I think as time went by, to your point, as I got more comfortable, I was much more
yeah,
confident, and bringing to the table more of my culture and how
yeah,
I would spend time with my friends and that kind of
yeah,
thing. So
yeah,
it's so important, isn't it, to be yourself, because then you feel much more, I think, confident and comfortable in the actual working environment,
yeah.
rather than trying to play up to a facade or pretend to be someone else.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I think just in terms of where when you do land somewhere, you kind of think what allows you to do the best, and you always think actually something different will allow you to do your best. But actually, I think one thing you always got to remember is what got you to where you are. You must have done something right, and you must be doing something right. So don't try and be different. But there were always instances. I remember kind of when I was at university and I was kind of interviewing for various kind of placements, and you would go into environments where I'm from Cambridge, I'm from Oxford, and what am I doing here? How do I fit in with this group of people? And then you try and talk a certain way, but that doesn't get you success, does it?
No, no, no. And I think it's cool just hearing from a CFO talking these ways because, while I was at BT, we would very rarely get any sort of interaction with, people at that level. So it's kind of just nice hearing from you in this way. And I think a lot of people listening thinking, Sandip sounds like someone I could get on with, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's you've just got to be yourself, right? You've just got to lay it all down, and it's definitely something I've kind of learned. I've probably got a couple of stories I'll share today, but one actually you kind of touched on before, just around you kind of express your culture a little bit more. So I'm Hindu. That's the religion I follow. Or parents have kind of brought me into from a very young age. And I remember Diwali is our big kind of celebration every year. And I remember one year, my parents asked me to take a day off for it, and I was like, yeah, yeah, sure. And I took the day off, and then at work I was like, oh, I've taken tomorrow. I'm off tomorrow. And then they asked, oh, what are you doing with your day off? Like you would in any normal conversation. I didn't say I'm celebrating Diwali. I said I'm going to see a few friends. And then I kind of look back and you go, why did I do that? Why did I? But it's, when you're in that environment, sometimes you don't do yourself justice, and I didn't in that instance. But now,
Mm.
if anyone would ask me now, I'd be absolutely upfront.
And that you think that was because you were just sort of trying to conform and just, I don't know, fit in with everyone else, or?
Absolutely, 100%. Kind of didn't want any questions around it. Didn't want any kind of anything that kind of associated with me being different.
Mm. So interesting. And well, I think the positive thing now, maybe we'll talk about the changes in a lot of
Yeah,
ways, but different is being celebrated, I think, a lot more now.
yeah,
And I think, if companies aren't creating that sort of really inclusive environment, then there's something a bit wrong. So if anything, I think people are more encouraged now to, embrace and be their true selves at work, I
yeah,
think, more so than
yeah.
ever. I think, yeah. Yeah.
And then there's definitely that kind of that difference. And look, everyone's kind of coming in at on things at kind of different stages, and everyone has different capabilities. Everyone has different background. Is probably another little story to kind of share with you and the listeners of when I was interviewing for my industrial placement, which I didn't end up landing. um, I got past the first round of interviews with UBS, and the second round was a dinner. And I was like, oh, a dinner. And it was a dinner with I think 20 people, 20 candidates, and it was kind of private dining within their facilities. And in the invitation it said formal dinner. You had to kind of pick what you're going to eat. And then my parents asked me, oh, do you know what a formal dinner is? Do you know how it works? I was like, I've got no clue. And then the way my mum described it to me was just, I guess, the layout of the forks and knives and the spoons and which ones you have to use. And it's funny how little things like that you know I had nothing. I didn't know at that age, and now I clearly do. But there'll be a whole load of people like that still that don't know that, but you kind of think people know that. But just small things like that, and then you think, well, I need to get that right because I'm going to be watched, and I might not get the job because I pick up the wrong fork. And
Yeah,
the,
that's
the,
funny.
yeah, the conversations at home were kind of ridiculous. But yeah, what I would say is I didn't get the placement, but I did pick up the right fork and knife.
There you go. There you go. So it couldn't have been that. It couldn't have been that. But
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can bond over that because I also well, I don't remember I didn't go to any dinner. I didn't, maybe I wasn't maybe I didn't get to that stage, but got pretty close at UBS and didn't get a role there as well, so we can bond over that. But in hindsight, pretty happy I didn't, to be honest. So yeah, that's a funny anecdote. And in terms of your sort of career paths, I think another challenge that people run into is like deciding which direction to go down. So you mentioned you had a bit of a thing for maths, but how did you ultimately, get on this route? Was it pretty pre-planned, or was a lot of it sort of spontaneous in terms of how it laid out?
Yeah, so what I'd say is I also did from the media company that I did work experience with. He also referred me to his accountants to do some work experience there as well. And the one thing I'd said after coming out of that work experience is I never want to be an accountant, which I am today, I would say. But coming out of university, I did economics at university, and actually through university, we had the whole kind of the tech bubble at the back end of the 90s, early 2000s, where you had the rise of lots of tech firms and the demise of lots of tech firms as well at that time. And clearly the big ones survived, like Google and so on and so on. But with the excitement of that, and I got quite close to the business world, I thought, I want to go into the banking world, and I interviewed with quite a few banks, wasn't successful, and then started to go, right, maybe I'll look to see if I could pursue a different career. And a recruiter dropped me the opportunity to go and interview with a car firm warehouse. So I was like, well, what do I want to go and do? Go there for? Read about the company, was quite excited, quite interesting. But it was an accounting job, but the whole to it, right? And so that I was a bit like, well, no. And that's where my parents came a little bit, and they're like, well, it's a long-term career, it's a good career choice, you can. And I spoke to John as well at the time, the guy from the media company. He goes, well, you could do a lot of things with that kind of start in your career. Interviewed with them and absolutely loved the buzz of the place, the people, and luckily I got the job, so landed that. And actually, a couple months after landing the job, I had Goldman Sachs approach me, and it was Goldman Sachs. So I thought, oh, I should go. I should really go and interview. And interviewed, and this time I got the job with the bank, and it was paying maybe double what Carphone was paying me, and it's the bright lights of the banking world. And I sat down and evaluated kind of what am I doing now, what where this could take me. Spoke to a few people I started to get to know, and I decided not to take the job. And it still kind of shocks me a little bit, because if I rewinded 3 months or 4 months before that, I was kind of itching for that sort of opportunity. And I think a big game changer for me was the people, the culture that I landed in. That had an immediate impact on me. And actually, sometimes you've got to try something before you kind of completely dismiss it. And that was probably what I was doing at the Carphone Warehouse. Is I tried something, and I was really, really enthralled by what it was doing and where we were going as a business and what skills I was building. And so here I am today. If I hadn't made that decision, I wouldn't be here today. And I'm thankful for all the people that helped me through that journey at that point in time specifically, because who knows where I'd be if I didn't make that decision at that time.
Interesting. So, and it's funny as well, because I'm copying you in some ways. I guess I went after, but I also got offered a role at Goldman Sachs, but I decided to go to BT instead, because yeah, it's quite funny. So because it was my graduate scheme was in BT Sport, and
Yeah,
I'm avid sports fan, and the chance to sort of rotate around the different areas within BT Sport was just, I was I never want to turn that down. And
yeah,
I'm sure much less money and all that kind of thing, but again, you go to some of the assessment centers, you make some friends, you kind of get a feel for the culture and the environment, and you just think, you get that feeling, don't you? You have that feeling that this is the right place for me. So what would be your advice then off the back of that? Is sort of, it's interesting there, you really listen to your family, right, and what they thought. Sometimes we hear the opposite of like, oh, my family wants me to be an accountant, but I don't want to. But you took that on board, and
yeah,
I guess ignored some of the, you sort of said bright lights, and maybe the sort of place you thought was right on paper, maybe to go down a different path that you just enjoyed more.
yeah. I think my dad often tells me I told you so, and just in terms of that, the where I landed, I think it's quite very easy. Look, even for someone like me at my point in my career, and anybody to kind of be attracted by money and things that are kind of dangled in front of you. I would say, but don't let that be the deciding factor to what you end up doing. I think you've got to really enjoy what you're doing. It's interesting. Me and my wife were on the way back from somewhere the other day, and she goes, "Oh, you really enjoy your job, don't you?" And I was like, 100%. I really enjoy the job I do. The people I work with is a big factor. The people, if you've got good people around you, if you've got good people working for you and that you're working for, that makes a big difference. And that kind of entails the culture around you as well. And sometimes it's your gut. Sometimes you've got to listen to your gut in terms of it feels right. You might not be able to pinpoint what it is, but it actually feels right, and it feels like the right thing to do. And so sometimes you've got to really kind of follow that feeling. You won't always get it right though. There have been times where I've kind of gone, I'm going to do this role and not quite enjoyed it, and I've gone on to do the next thing. But if you don't make mistakes, you're not going to learn as well. So that's also, I would say, an important part of what you do as well. But so a few kind of things in there that I've kind of thrown out, but hopefully you kind of get a feel for what I'm kind of pitching there.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense in terms of figuring out what is actually right for you. And one thing we've been talking about a lot more recently is the fact that it's absolutely okay to change your mind in your career, or do a certain degree and then actually decide, what, I want to do something completely different. I've done economics, but I want to do marketing now, or I want to go into the creative industry. Like, I think those changes are all completely fine, and it's so difficult to try and have it all laid out from the start. It's just
Yeah.
not really how life works, is it? You sort
No.
of grow and stumble on
Yeah.
what's
And
right
look,
for you.
you spend anywhere between 30 to 50 years working, right? And I think and you spend more time with at work and with the people at work than you do at home, frankly. And if you don't enjoy what you do, then you're gonna be quite an unhappy person, and that has its impacts on your kind of mental health and so on. So I'm always a strong believer of follow something you do like, and follow something that does make you happy. And if you're not enjoying the culture and the people around you, it's it's plenty of choice, right? There's people, there's places you can go, and people you can speak to either change that. Sometimes it's difficult to change the environment you're in, but it's easier to change into a different environment. But if sometimes the grass is greener on the other side, you think the grass is greener on the other side, and actually it's not. But again, it goes back to your point of there's no harm in trying, right? I have people in our organization that have left, and actually you call them the boomerangs, right? That they leave, and actually after a period of time they go, actually I want to come back. And you know we welcome them back with open arms to go, right, there's an opportunity to do this, why don't you come and do this? And so yeah, and there's no kind of stigma in that at all. It's human nature.
Yeah, that's another great one of like, you're told you have to be in this job for a certain amount of time, or else, it will look terrible on your CV. And then so it's like, wait, so if I'm not enjoying this role, I'm just supposed to stick it out? Or, if I see an amazing opportunity that, could be a complete game changer, I'm supposed to, not go that route just because of an arbitrary sort of thing that someone once said. So I think this is something that is really important for young people, just to understand how organic these things are, and that it's not like a simple box. You can keep your options open and look around and move if it's not right for you.
Yeah.
So I think well, we've learned a ton already, but you've really sort of networked to get that sort of first job. You listen to your friends and family. You really thought about, what do I actually enjoy, as opposed to what I think maybe I should do based on studying a degree in economics and that kind of thing. I'm now fascinated with, how do we get to CFO? How do we, and I'll sort of leave it to you to take that wherever you want, but is it we need to be displaying certain qualities all the way through? Do we need to be getting on certain projects of big sizes? I don't know. I'm curious as to how you actually get all the way to that level, basically.
I would say sometimes you need a bit of luck, and I think, you know, right time, right place sometimes needs to happen. I would say at the point in time, just in terms of when I guess, you know, I thought I was ready, the people around me in the business thought I could do the job, you know, that time presented itself, and so I was lucky in that sense. And you know, that doesn't always happen, but you know, there would have been a time before that where I thought, you know, I am ready, but kind of listening to my, you know, my line manager at the time to go, right, I need to work on X, Y, and Z. I need to network a bit more. I need to continue to build my experience, because one of the things that he would have said to me at the time is, you're in a job at the moment, Sandip, but why don't you try and make sure you get everything you possibly can from this job to make sure you're set up for success in that next job you take. And actually, you know, to your point in time horizons in a job, I would always go, right, challenge yourself in terms of, have you extracted everything you can for your own benefit in that job before you decide to kind of jump. But sometimes you kind of, another opportunity presents itself. And I think that kind of listening to people around, you know, people that have been there, done that, I think is useful. You need to have those people around you as well, and you need to have access to those people. But you know, listening to them, because they've gone for a path that might not necessarily work for you, but you know, it's worked for them and it may work for you. There's no secret sauce, I would say, as well. There's you know, kind of worked hard, you know, delivered results. You know, those two are clearly important, as well, with the mix of, you know, right place, right time. And I think, you know, what are some of the things I would say I've kind of demonstrated through the course of my career is that kind of, you know, working hard, being reliable. It's just kind of basics, really. You kind of start with the basics, because if you don't have the foundations, then you can't kind of elevate from there as well. You then, you know, what impact can you have? You know, what's the kind of impact you have on the organization? What's the impact you have on people? You know, what's the care you have for people as well, in terms of, because you remember, you know, the higher up you go, probably the more responsible you are for more people. And for me, I've always kind of displayed a passion for people and doing the right thing for people, and you know, helping people on their journeys as well, because you know, that's important. So some kind of key leadership traits then start to come through, and then you know, if you can demonstrate that, then people then start to think, well, actually, this person can lead a business, or they can lead an organization, or they can lead us through, you know, good times, bad times. And the final thing I'd say is probably one of the key things I've displayed through the course of my career is resilience. You know, you get thrown many things in your career, and I think it's about not being phased, and you know, about using the resources around you, using common sense. Sometimes, you know, you lean on, actually, this feels like the right thing to do, and this is what I'd do outside of work, or if I was in another situation, well, just do the same inside of work. So you know, I think there's a whole multitude of things that kind of help you towards where you need to get to. The final thing I'd say is you need people to be honest around you. In that, a lot of the time, you know, I might think I can be the next astronaut on the moon. Well, actually, I'll be sitting here for a very long time because I don't have the right experience to do that. And I might need someone to tell me that actually I don't have the right experience to do that. If I'm sitting here thinking um, I'm doing that. So actually, the organisation you're in and the people that manage you have an obligation to tell you that, right? I would say, because if you're sitting there going, right, Toby, I work for you, and I think I can be the next astronaut on the moon, you know, I think then you do have an obligation to say, actually, Sandip, you don't have the right skill set or the experience to do that, and you need to do X, Y, and Z to do that. And actually, I'll often listen to the people around me in those specific things, in that actually you need to build your experience out in X, Y, and Z. It might not be the right answer, but it's the best answer at the time, and actually that just generally helps you progress and become a better person altogether. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And yeah, it's interesting. I remember there was certain, I remember probably coming off the back of my graduate scheme, really wanting to, you know, progress and do a bigger role, or you know, run the whole project and things like that, just to try to, you know, really, you know, amass the skills and, you know, set the CV on fire and that sort of thing. But I remember at certain times managers sort of explaining to me, you know, that I did need to work on a few things before I can completely manage that client or try and negotiate that deal or whatever. And in a lot of ways, that they sort of, what I grew to learn was they're protecting you as well in some ways,
Yes.
because if you are thrown into the deep end a bit before you're ready, you can really, get quite scarred, right, by that experience if things don't go well, and you're the sort of the face of that, right? And
Yeah.
I imagine as well, people are probably listening and thinking, maybe CFO is quite a while off, but in terms of progressing and amassing more responsibility, it does sound quite daunting, doesn't it, to be responsible for a team. And we've recently expanded and hired a new person recently, and it's someone you've got to manage, you've got to nurture, and naturally, I think with your team as a whole, you're going to go through failures, right? In terms of, and it might be something you've decided or I've decided that's just not gone well. So, and there's that added responsibility of, you're sort of responsible for this group of people. How do you manage that, sort of the daunting nature of that, and any failures that take place?
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think my wife often keeps me humble in terms of reminding me how many, the level of responsibility I get, because sometimes you often forget in terms of the magnitude of the business I look after, the number of people within my team, within our business that I'm a senior leader within. And for me, often you kind of ask yourself, it's kind of a saying when you're in the school playground, or your parents often tell you when you're young, treat people like you like to be treated yourself, right? How often have we heard that? And I still kind of think about that saying, when you're kind of dealing with certain situations, or you're kind of dealing with people day in, day out, how do you want to be managed? Is that how you would like to see things? And often you kind of, that allows you to ground yourself in what actions you take. And that responsibility can be daunting. The obligation of, people are looking to you to make the right decision, or looking for a steer. But sometimes you just got to lean on what you've done in the past. You don't necessarily, as the leader of a team, I'd say very often you don't have the best idea in the room, right? You need to listen to the people around you, and you need to remind them of that, and be humble enough to go, I've not got the best idea, actually you guys do. Now let's debate these, and then let's find the right solution here. And often you empower people to do that, and you do end up with the power of 5-6 people in the team in the room. You end up in a much better position, rather than me going, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and this is why, and everyone thinking, not sure that's quite the right thing to do. So I think that's really, really important in that facet there.
But there must be times when you have to make a final decision, and it's turned out to not be the right one.
Oh yes,
And
yes.
so what yeah, so what happens next? Is it just, like anything else in life, you sort of held your hands up, or what happens at that point?
Look, I think there's always the context of where you make a decision, why you make a decision. So I will always kind of go through in my mind, what's the context, what's the reasoning, can I rationalize it? So that's in the moment of making a decision. After that, you're going, the decision can either be a good decision or not so good decision. Where it's a not so good decision, I'll always own the decision, right? Even if my team make a mistake, I will own that, right? If I'm leading a team and someone's made a mistake, it's it's me in my team, and we have made the wrong decision, and I'll put my hands up and say, look, we've made that wrong decision, but we will learn from that, and we will kind of reflect on our decision making process, what's happened and why. And if that scenario presents itself again, we're most likely, with the learning, make a different decision. And that decision will be the right decision for that context in that time. So I think a strong believer of people will make mistakes, I will make mistakes, but fundamentally you must not shy away from them, and you must learn from them, and don't repeat that mistake, because that is for me that's a little bit criminal, in terms of, if the same context presents itself and your kind of ego makes sure you make the same decision as you did prior, and you make the same mistake, then you kind of had the opportunity not to make that mistake again. And so how do you prevent yourself from making that mistake again?
That was a one just for me, to be honest. I'm just curious, because inevitably, like you say, you're going to make mistakes. And what I've really sort of thought about lately is exactly what you've just said, and things are obviously more so a group decision now, and then you can also, what I've tried to really do is just be super honest when I'm asked, should we do this or should we do this, or what's the best way to do this? And sometimes I'll just say, what, guys, I don't know, let's figure it out as a team. And it's almost like if something does go wrong after that, you can kind of you sort of make everything is like collaborative, isn't it? If you do it that way.
And sometimes you've got to understand the journey people have gone through. So there'll be a point in time where people do come and ask you, and then by understanding the journey, you'll understand if they've exhausted everything they possibly could, and actually they fundamentally just don't know. And at that point in time, you just do need to make the decision, because otherwise, you won't. And but if you've kind of explored the kind of decision making process people have been through, then you might go, actually, there are a few things that we do need to explore here. And then it is just about owning it, and having that conviction, kind of moving forward, really. I would say you never look back, but you do need to look back to learn, even in the good decisions, right? Don't forget kind of the what you did to make good decisions. And but we all make mistakes, right? I'll make mistakes, my CEO will make mistakes, but we own them, we learn from them, we move forward.
Brilliant. And from a well-being perspective, then,
yes,
we've mentioned this sort of responsibility we've got here. We've got the kids at home. We've kind of, there's a lot to juggle. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so I've got a fantastic wife that kind of supports me to do the job that I do, and it's but all jobs are demanding, right, in their own nature. And so in most mornings I'll kind of run or do a bit of exercise, and then I like to attend a boot camp every kind of couple of times a week, actually, which is with a bunch of people that have nothing to do with BT, have nothing to do with finance, and are just a really good group of people that there's no egos there. It's kind of how quickly can you complete the task, rather than what do you do and what's your title. And so you're really kind of grounded. And so they're kind of two things. And then outside of kind of exercise, as I said, I'm a big sports fan, so cricket is my main game. And actually the NBA is probably my second game, actually, basketball. So I'm a massive kind of basketball fan, but generally probably like you were saying, a big sports enthusiast. So kind of slowly getting my boys into different sports, so it means I can spend time with them on my passions as well, which is really, really good fun. And finally, just spending time with my boys in the garden or at home. This weekend, what did we do? We played a bit of cricket in the garden, practicing a bit of bowling with them, and a bit of Monopoly as well over the weekend. So it's always kind of good fun as well.
Incredible. Yeah, I'm a big NBA fan as well, so could talk to you for a long time about that.
Who's your team?
So I'm a big, I must confess, I'm a very big LeBron fan. So, I've been a fan of a few different teams. So Lakers now, and I don't want to talk about that, but I've rolled with the Cavs, rolled with Miami. I'm a die easy fan when it comes to basketball. With football, I've got Arsenal, it's only Arsenal, but in the NBA right now, it's just wherever LeBron's playing. So when he's retired, I'm gonna have to sort of start from scratch. But I'll probably go with Lakers because I did love Kobe as well. So yeah.
Well, we've got that in common, and you're currently top of the table with Arsenal. And maybe when you come down into BT next time, I'll introduce you to some of the fellow Arsenal supporters. There's quite a few here in BT.
There we go. That's good to know. But I would be remiss if I didn't just confirm. What was an example of one of those boot camps? That sounded really interesting.
So basically, what did we do? On Monday? We did some sprinting work. We did some squats with some kind of some beer kegs, hitting some tires with some big hammers and big tires, and tire flipping, and running with kind of big logs of wood and stuff like that. So it's kind of an hour of intense training. So it always feels like a good idea when you're signing up for it. And then once you're kind of an hour through the session, you're kind of like, what, part way through the session, you're like, what did I do that for? So but it's always it's kind of really, really good fun, actually.
So important is that I find that for myself. If I'm struggling a little bit, or being overwhelmed with anything, then
Yeah.
straight to exercise. What would be your one piece of advice, do you think, for your younger self? So if you were talking to young Sandeep before he embarked on this career journey you've gone on, what would you want to say to him?
Oh, I'm not sure if I could drill it down to one piece of advice. Probably a couple of things I've touched on today. Make sure you enjoy, you always enjoy what you do. Make sure you listen to the people around you. Sometimes you do feel you do know best, but I think you do listen. And sometimes it's kind of active listening and rather than inactive listening. And you know, it's really about following what you like, and that's for me, that's probably the most important thing, to be honest. That's why I'm kind of sitting here reflecting, going, is there anything else? But you know do make sure you do enjoy yourself and be yourself as well. Sorry, that probably the final thing, be yourself, because I kind of look back at some of those instances that I've spoken about, and they could have led to some really fascinating conversations, but actually you'd say the kind of diversity and inclusion agenda is only really accelerated in over the past couple of years for maybe the wrong or the right reasons. But you would go, people like me could have done something previously to do that, to have those conversations and to educate people. So you kind of go, you've got a bit of personal responsibility to to kind of just be yourself, and that way you will enjoy yourself, and you'll have fun along the way, which is also important. And you kind of then look back and you go, actually, I made a difference to what I wanted to, and I enjoyed it as well. So happy days.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice, honestly. And I hear so many people really struggling, really getting anxious about not having got that one, investment banking graduate
Yeah,
scheme, or and they figure out actually they don't even care about investment banking. So I think that's important to understand. You know what, it's okay to just go out there and do
yeah,
what you enjoy, right? Not what you think
yeah.
you should be
um,
doing on paper.
and what I'd say is, if when you do reflect, and whatever job you end up working in, you should always kind of leave every day going, I've done my best. I think that's important, because be it, if you haven't got that job you want, do the best you possibly can in the job you are, and have that sense of achievement. And if you're doing your best, you can't look back and go, I didn't do my best, and I could have done X, Y, and Z, and we could have done better. I would say, you always kind of reflect to go, actually, I did do my best, and or what can I do to do better tomorrow if I felt I didn't do my best. So because then hindsight is a wonderful thing, but you kind of go, I did everything I can, and actually I did end up doing what I wanted to, or I moved on to what I wanted to, because I did do my best.
Incredible, incredible. And as I said, BT was the place for me where I really was able to progress my career. So I'm delighted that we've been able to partner together, and we're going to be helping, a lot of you listeners to get roles there, early career roles at BT. So do look out for those. There'll be a link wherever you're watching or listening to our website and our job board. We'll be showcasing placement opportunities, entry level roles, internships, grad schemes with BT, which will be fantastic. So just wanted to say a big thank you, Sandeep, for your time. And I think a lot of the wisdom you shared, I think it's going to make a really big difference. So thanks so much for sharing some time with us.
No, and thank you very much again for having me today.